Take your deep breath. Inhale, exhale. Allow yourself to get centered and receive the gratitude and appreciation as I welcome you to a podcast hosted by yours truly, Sam Walker Inspo. Allow me to introduce you to Can I Talk My Shift? The podcast where we talk all things internal and how to shift your views on self. I'm talking the inner workings that you've denied for far too long. Now we can accept a new level of accountability, which ultimately allows you to show up more authentically in all aspects of life. Remember, everything revolves back to self. Inhale, exhale, and let's go. Yo, what's up? What's good? Great day, all the above. Welcome to the Can I Talk My Shift podcast, the place where I converse about how you may or may not be showing up in space and how to identify blocks that keep you from representing yourself in the most authentic way. I'm your host, Sam Walker Inspo, and with episode 2, I want to take you on a ride with me today. Follow me on this one because it's necessary to open up and allow my dialogue to seep through the cracks in the barrier between who you think you are and who you actually are. All right. I've come to learn that as there's many layers and pieces to, everything from politics to God or the all to nature and the environment. There's many layers and pieces to the ego. All right. And almost like Power Rangers. You know what I'm saying? And I hate to grab that analogy, but it's the one that came off the top, so we're going to roll with it. It's like Power Rangers. You know how you got like the 5 Rangers and they have their robots that they hop in, and then those robots, they can fight individually, but then when they come together, they make like the ultimate one, Zoid. I forget the name of them, but you know what I'm getting at. If you was a Power Rangers fan, shout out to you. So I've come to learn that the ego is similar. My ego is similar. I've been breaking down my ego bit by bit. And I found a lot of these elements or the energies of my ego latch on to childhood traumas that they just need a little bit of addressing. You know what I'm saying? And so I taught myself to identify these things. And I identify them almost as if they're people. Really, I identify them almost as if people I've been in relationships with. Now, I don't equate them to actual people I've been involved with. No, but the energy itself that make up, or the different energies themselves, I equate to almost like people. All right. And so follow me here. My life is my partner before any romantic relationship. It's me and my life. You know what I'm saying? She shares me with, whomever, and I share her with like my romantic interests. All right. And then, it's mutually decided and agreed upon that our relationship, we're going to share that with the woman in my life or a friend in my life, a homie, a homeboy. You know what I'm saying? Now, the same goes for Lil Mama, aka my daughter. That's a non-negotiable. We sharing that, sharing my life with her. You feel me? I signed up for that. when she was born. All right. So life has basically been sticking it out with me through all of my bullshit, mishaps, misfortunes, wins, losses, all the above, etc. Yada yada. Cool. Now, this is where you and I can connect because I feel, better yet, I know I've been cheating on life. Right here on the podcast, I'm letting you know I've been cheating on life with, drum roll, perfectionism. I've been cheating on life with perfectionism. Man. And so this is where I jump into the podcast, right? Just to go right into it. Perfectionism is like almost like a twisted partner you never really want to get into a relationship with. You know, like you kind of see them on the movies. You'll see, like you'll follow one of the characters. You be like, I'll never date a person like that. Or I know somebody just like that. Man, I could spot them from a mile away. I'll never get involved with them. And then you look 4 years down the road and you involved with this exactly with the person that you said you wouldn't even go rock with like that. Yeah. So that's kind of like what perfectionism is. And I don't even want to use the trigger word, but we're going to throw it out there. Almost like that narcissistic partner. And if you've never really been involved with the narcissist before, it's very, very hard to decipher. And so we just leave that there. You know what I'm saying? But perfectionism, it invades, and then it invaded my life and it meshed with my ego. Okay, so it meshed with it to a point where now it's like fused. And so then in a way it like took over and it broke me down to a point where I could no longer resist it, but it did it in such a unique way that I didn't even know it was happening. You feel what I'm saying? And so it if I can equate it to anything, it's kind of like this barrier that almost comes up like, yo, I'm cuffing. Like, you know how you see dudes sometimes, insecure dudes, they'll like cuff their girl when there's some dudes around, you know, like, yeah, this me. You know what I'm saying? Like that's not even real, you know. But anyway, you can almost feel its resistance towards other people and its overbearing nature. We're talking about perfectionism now. Don't get lost in translation. All right? That's what I'm talking about. I can feel its resistance towards other people, and I can feel its overbearing nature. And for a lot of my life, I could only hope to be successful in hiding it, but I couldn't. And it might be the same thing for you too. You know, you can only hope to be successful in hiding it, but you can't hide in plain sight. You know what I'm saying? Like fixing your clothes 50,000 times, 11 times out in public. The 9 sprays of cologne or perfume instead of like 3. Because you just gotta smell perfect enough to leave a whiff behind to catch whomever, or just enough to let yourself know throughout the day that you smelling magnificent. And you do this each and every time. It's not like it happened the one time where you going on this date that you've been anticipating. We're talking about every single time. The OCD at home, you know, double and triple checking everything, you know, arranging the pillows on the couch and shit that look like, you know, nobody actually occupies the space, you know, and you do this like every day. It's not just when relatives or friends are coming in town, you know, you do it all the time. that energy has been sucking the life out of me while keeping me boxed in. And it gets deeper. It gets deeper. Perfectionism, y'all. I'm trying to tell you. And so I had to ask myself, well, how in the hell did I cheat on life with something like that? Why would I do it? Because once I identified it like that, then it's so much easier to break the cord of energy. You know what I'm saying? Break away from it, identify it, and see if it what it really is. So I had to kind of analyze how it showed up in my life. So I'm using myself as an example so you can maybe thumb through some of those situations and circumstances in your life to see if perfectionism is really affecting you and your growth. You know what I'm saying? All right. So I'll say this. Living in a facade skews your outlook on who you are and where you're trying to go. So when I won't even say you, because I'm working on this on the UI thing too. When I view life through perfectionism's lens, it skews my outlook and it really blocks me from being who I want to be authentically. From there, I would project onto anyone that I would tell like my actual business model to, or like ideas to, or anything, because I wanted it to be perfect, because I wanted to garner this response as being perceived as great or perfect, right? But deep down, I was fearful as fuck. And you might be able to identify with that. If you got to ask somebody to borrow some money, a lot of us don't want to deal with that. But we've all been there. Ain't no shame in the shit. We done it. When you ask somebody for money, do you come up with like the most perfectly pieced together ensemble of a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a captivating climax, just to make sure that that person that you're asking will give you what you asking for? Like if you're that type of person, that's the shit I'm talking about. The perfectionism, because you don't want to be perceived as fearful or weak. You know what I'm saying? Because you could simply just be like, hey, man, I spent way too much money on something and I'm behind on my rent, yo. And this is what I need. Are you able to help me out? Versus coming up with the whole shebang and story and the yada yaddies, this, that, and the thirds, and creating this whole energetic pool around the story. Because then that's kind of like manipulation. And we don't even want to get into that in this podcast yet. You know what I'm saying? So in regards to relationships, perfectionism kind of comes in and says we're never the problem because we can't be the problem. If we cause the problem, or if we're causing challenging situations for whoever we're involved with, perfectionism doesn't allow us to go layers deep because it steers us towards the effects and not the cause or like the root of the issue. You know what I'm saying? So if you've been trying to be perfect your entire life, and then let's say like, yo, you had a hot boy, hot girl summer, and you know, you did your thing, you feel me? And then so now after summer, you in the wintertime, you know, you find somebody and you know you're really interested in them. And then y'all start to have like a little conversation about the past, whatever. And you're like, oh, yeah, I ain't never gonna tell him about that because then my facade, my mask wouldn't fit. This is how they look at me. They see me so perfect. And perfectionism is pushing that all throughout your life, pushing it forward. And so you'll never really get to the root of it. It steers you away from the thing that it's latched on to. Somewhere in childhood, something, happened. Guaranteed. 9.5 out of 10 times. You can identify a situation that was like, yo. And so then it caused you to want to be perfect and have all your ducks in a row, or you know what I'm saying. Another thing is perfectionism kind of takes over when you don't believe you're where you're supposed to be yet, or you don't believe in who you are. And so you try to mask it because it's not giving you the results that you want. You're not garnering the results that you want in your life. And so perfectionism will become the mask. It's almost like it takes over you completely. So then you go outside of yourself and you constantly need someone to validate your moves. And that's a layer of mental imprisonment. There's no freedom in that. Like, there is none. So I go to myself in this situation. I say, yo, I'm going to share this. When I was 15, all right, my mother passed away in front of my face. Okay? I won't really get into the story. I'll save the story for another time. But I did try to do CPR myself, along with two other people that were there in this situation with me at the time. And one of the things that for years I fought with and dealt with on my own and hit it was the need to be so fucking perfect, because I felt like in that moment I didn't do enough. In that moment in time, I felt like even with what I knew, I didn't execute it perfectly enough. And so I was the cause of my mother not being here anymore on this planet. But do you see how there's so many gaps in that? But perfectionism won't allow you to see the gaps. Perfectionism will be like, yo, if you study shit and, you practice more, or, you become so hyper aware of things, you won't miss shit. And then you won't ever have to worry about nothing as traumatic as that ever again in your life. So it feeds you these false narratives to fill the gaps when really the gaps need to be filled with truth. That was a deep takeaway. You might want to get your notepad out for this one, because again, I go back to how could I live with something that does this constantly throughout the day, all the time? How? Why? And so you get tied up in this psychopathic relationship of relentless, like, just gray clouds, no sunlight, no joy. Doesn't allow you to be who you really are. Doesn't allow you the space to make mistakes. And then especially if you're an entrepreneur like myself, man, it'll have you out here trying on different masks any which way. If you're not being able to be rooted in understanding that nobody's perfect and that you are enough. I'm enough. You're enough. We're all enough. You know what I'm saying? So another thing that I want to skip to is we'll circle back to entrepreneurship, because and building a career or building a business or building a foundation for yourself financially, right? Now, this is where we go to more of the monetary section and how perfectionism can stop you from networking properly, uh, asking for the help that you need. You know what I'm saying? And not, again, not allowing you to show up and representing yourself in the most authentic way. So perfectionism kind of snuck in and says to me, you can skip the process. And if you skip the process, it's because you know what you're supposed to know already. So you should be where you dream of in your mind. But skipping the process and feeling entitled to be like amongst people who are in some way, shape, or form ahead of where you are in life, it creates this barrier of competition. And everything they do now irritates you and your ego. It makes you feel less than. Now, the thing about that statement is all of this generating friction that you're probably trying to hide. Whereas if you were viewing it from a lens of creation, you could learn from that person's truths, their accomplishments, their mistakes, and their misfortunes. So perfectionism only allows you to gauge from a certain vantage point. It only allows you to see through its lens. And so because you're not perfect, this other person you view as perfect, it creates that sense of competition for you. So it keeps you boxed in the level that you're at. You'll never be able to step outside of that or above that or ascend, transcend, whatever, because of the perfectionism mindset. It's latched onto you in all aspects of your life. I've gone down the list here of how it affects you internally, how it shows up externally in relationships, and now how it shows up externally in your finances and your career. I always revert back to when I was building my uh, media platform, the Plug TV. Firstly, I was I was in no way, shape, or form in the mindset that I am now. Everything in 2020 is hindsight. I didn't create the space to see all of these factors as to how perfectionism was setting in and ultimately not allowing us uh, to grow. Yeah, I had the interviews with Rick Ross, got invited to Ty Dolla Sign's yacht party. My very first ever celebrity interview was with Roxy Reynolds, and I'm sure all my men know who that is. One of the most infamous porn stars on the planet. And that was my first interview ever. And I look back at those times and I realized my only real purpose at that time was to live up to the hype that was projected onto me since a child. And that's not a real purpose at all. Every time I ran into somebody back at VA, I had to be doing something with an awe factor. Every time I reached out to build a connection, I had to have a perfectly detailed explanation. And whether it was an email, a text, or a response, it didn't matter. I had to be everything had to be like crystal sheen, like Swiffered up. You know what I'm saying? No stains on the floor, as if we wasn't building it from the mud. We already had to look like we was the part in order to play the part, but the part wasn't even being created because we weren't allowing any space for it to come. We already had it together. And that's an equation for disaster. So that's how perfectionism came in, swooped in, and pretty much, halted everything before it even got started with me. At least in that part of my journey. And so now I come on this podcast and I understand that I'm rooted in a different foundation. I've since taken a long, hard look at myself and realized, through all my experiences that I can share these things and people can resonate. And so even with this episode, this is like my breakup with perfectionism, which leads us to the final section of the podcast, the ways that I combat perfectionism, because I'm done. I don't want it. I don't want the energy. I don't need it in my life anymore. I don't need to be something that walks around as if, it's perfect. Nobody is. And even when you say that, you better believe it though. Because it's one thing to say it, but really in your mind, you still trying to uphold, the levee of perfectionism. All of that weight from masking and, trying to be a superhero and just, man, it's exhausting. That shit was exhausting. You know what I'm saying? So, moving right along, check it. Here are some ways that I combated the energy of perfectionism. And hopefully you find value in this entire podcast, but especially this part, because that's ultimately what it's about. It's about freeing us so we can represent ourselves in the best way and in the most authentic way. I don't care if you're a rapper, a producer, a songwriter, an artist, a chef, a wellness coach, a mechanic, a CEO, a mogul, an astronaut, EFI, spiritual, guidance counselor, whatever you are. Perfectionism can really sweep in and stir up a lot of shit. So, 3 things that I utilize to combat the energy of perfectionism, the consciousness of perfectionism, the possession of perfectionism: self-love, self-soothing, and the most important one, intention setting. Now I'm going to go from the bottom up. I set the intention by literally saying it out loud before I start. If I, for instance, if I'm about to do this podcast, I say to myself first, and then I say it out loud to validate what I'm saying all around. I want this podcast to resonate with whoever is dealing with the energy of perfectionism, that it will reach whomever is having challenges with overcoming the energy of perfectionism. My voice will resonate, stir up, and chase out the energy of perfectionism in whomever this podcast reaches, just like it's supposed to. That's my intention. I don't really have a number. I don't have a time frame. I just have an intent. And that's how I set an intention. That's an example. Another way is I do my best to set an intention or say the intention to a person out loud before I start the conversation. So this is in reference to uh external, right? So relationships. So the first one was internal world, setting that right. Boom, moving outward. Now, if I'm going to start a conversation with a person, I intentionally say the intent out loud, especially if we're just connecting or if there's like some discord or some type of agreement or static taking place. Yo, so man, my intent with you, bro, right now is to figure out how do we move forward from what I felt like was disrespect from your end. Or this is me talking in reference to my child. This is something I say to baby girl all the time. Hey, love, daddy is talking to you so you understand the importance of why I need you to be able to express yourself. So, the purpose of me talking to you right now is so you can understand my tone and know that this is a safe space and you can always express yourself to me. Because when you don't tell yourself the truth, then you end up not telling people that care about you the truth. Then you remove yourself from help out of fear, out of angst, out of worry. So, my intent with her in that moment is to create safety. And I say it. I'm creating a safe space right now so you can be vulnerable with me so we can then move forward. But now, going back to more of the adult relationship aspect, if their intent is opposite of mine, I make a conscious decision to, either move forward with the convo or I leave it be and respect their space for another time to reconvene. It's just what it is. Because what I've learned is because I'm so intentional, that's a lot of energy that I put into conversations. So I have to be mindful of self first because I respect the other person too. And I care. And so I don't want to half ass the conversation. I don't want to come in on some, my battery on 45%, and I don't really got the time or the space to give them, what they need or what we both may need to get out of the conversation. You know what I'm saying? And then with self-love and self-soothing, I can't lie. I'm still getting the hang of that. I definitely was one of those people who had to vent to someone outside of myself constantly. I really did. I was always looking for one of the homies to talk to tell them about something, you know what I mean? And now I've really learned to sit with my shit, navigate through the emotions that I'm feeling that are like sifting through my mind. And this directly combats perfectionism because there is no perfect way, right? These are just the ways that worked for me. And so if you're dealing with perfectionism, I hope that you found quality in the information that I provided from my experience to just my outlook. I think it's important that all of us as creatives, as entrepreneurs, as people, and as spiritual energetic beings, period, that we're able to identify these things that stifle our energetic growth, that stifle our resonance, that muddy up our water, so to speak. So just to recap, man, perfectionism. I was cheating on life with her. And so in me doing this podcast is my breakup, because life is so beautiful. Life has really found a way to allow me the space to fuck up and still be there to carry me through and allow me to show her off while being able to show myself off. That's the beauty of life. And it's like life knew that I was doing that, but it still had the space to love me unconditionally. And so I've identified how perfectionism rooted itself in all the aspects of life, from inside, right, internally, to relationships outwardly, to then moving into the financial aspects of my life and the entrepreneurial aspects of my life. And then to sum it all up, I'm giving you some of the ways that I combated it. So again, I hope that you found episode 2 to be one of intrigue and one of value. And I hope that if you aren't able to free yourself from perfectionism by listening to this podcast, you're at least brought into awareness of how it may be stifling your growth, how it may have created some barriers between you and some people, and ultimately how you can rid yourself of it and become the most authentic you. I'll catch you next time. Please swing by my website, www.samwalkerinspo.com. I have an outstanding blog where I go into the depths of a lot of situations and circumstances within my own life. I keep you updated as well. Like I said, I'm an entrepreneur. And so I'm working in phase 1 and phase 2 at the moment of releasing my debut book. And so you can always check the blog out on the website to keep you up to date. If you do want to follow, especially if you find value in this content that I'm providing, you can also follow me on Instagram, Sam Walker Inspo. Holla at your boy on there. Shoot me a DM if you got some questions that maybe you want to share with me. That would be dope too, because we're all learning. You know, we're all creating a safe space here to create value for one another and to ultimately be the best and most authentic versions of ourselves. So I'm going to wrap it up like that. To the outro. As we close out the podcast, I just want to thank you. Thank you for giving me your attention, your undivided. I really appreciate you, and I extend gratitude to you from one heart to another. I hope you enjoyed Can I Talk My Shift? I hope in just these few moments of listening to my voice that you were able to shift out into a new perspective and you can move more authentically. Till next time, peace.